Okay, good. Here we go. We're recording this session for people to view later for study, or if you miss the sync session. Today I'm going to illustrate the walkthrough of the lab 2.3.3.5. This is a lab where we take a single router, a single switch, and a single PCA, and you're going to do simple configuration on the switch, similar to what you did last time, but this time we're going to actually run the telnet program from our PCA and connect remotely to the switch like you probably would do in real life. You probably wouldn't have run to where the switch is located. It may be, it's raining and it's across the street. Oh, I don't want to get wet. Oh, you poor baby. Or it might be 400 miles away in a data center. So you want to telnet into it remotely and do stuff like that. Okay, so here's a simple configuration for this. I've already pre-wired this for you guys because unfortunately at this time we cannot allow you to get your own grubby grimies on the wires. Sorry. So switch 1 is your COM1 port. Your term program will be doing the console directly to the switch. And then the PCA is your virtual machine running under your VMware workstation. So it says on the lab, the step that I've already done for you guys is the step 1, where you cable the network, part 1, step 1. I have cabled the network for you. You guys have done mostly step B, where you establish a console connection to the switch from your term connection. We're going to configure some basic switch settings. Now, first of all, I want to guarantee, always before you start doing a lab, please check to make sure the router or switch is completely erased. Because if you have some previous configuration on there, it might not look like it's erased. It might look like it's been erased, but it has some configuration there previously. Typically, sneaky little VLAN file. It'll mess up your lab. So we're going to check on these and make sure this switch I already checked is erased, but here's how to guarantee it. Sometimes when you first connect to the switch, it will put up the thing on the screen that says, do you want to go into the guided configuration dialog? And you're going to say no to that, in or no, and press the enter key to do that. If you accidentally enter yes, it'll look something like this, and I'll show you how to get it. Is it called setup? It'll look like this. Configure with configuration dialog. If you accidentally enter yes, it starts asking you a bunch of mysterious questions about simple network management protocol, which we haven't talked about. Oh dear, what do I do? Oh no, no, no. So what you do to get out of this is just type the Control-C character. Hold down the Control key on your keyboard, like it was the Shift key, and touch the letter C, and that'll pop you right out of the setup routine. The setup routine has this value. It's like if you're the chief network engineer and you ship a new switch or router to a remote office, and you're going to talk a guy through the phone on setting up just enough so where you can telnet into it and you can complete the configuration. Because he's not going to. How would you try explaining to someone who's never had this before? Oh, you know, privilege exec mode, global configuration mode. It's their marketing manager. Okay, they're going to fuzz right out of this stuff. Okay, so let's check and make sure the switch has no existing configuration. 2 things to check on the switch. Okay, of course we have our running configuration that's already here, the default running configuration. And there's default host name switch. No IP addresses on the switch. All the ports are ready to become up and actually work stuff, because most of these switches that go into business have never been used before, or they'll never be configured. They just want them to be a fast switch. So we're going to put some configuration. Show star. There is no startup configuration. We're allowed to abbreviate most commands. When you erase the startup configuration, that's a dangerous command. You're required to spell the whole thing out. So you would have to type erase star and touch the tab key for tab completion and erase the whole thing, and you have to press enter twice because it's so damn dangerous to do. You're destroying the configuration on a switch. Still in RAM. Switch will run for years on RAM, but if it reboots again because of power outage and it has no startup configuration, then all of a sudden it doesn't have any configuration. The other thing we need to check on a switch that we never have to do on a router is check for the existence of any. We haven't talked about virtual LANs, VLANs. Typically, larger organizations use this. They'll make a marketing department in one subnetwork. They'll make the engineering department in another subnetwork. So I'm going to type the official command is show flash. Exactly the same though as a shorthand command, dir, and I'm looking for the presence of a file called vlan.dat, and there is not one there. Okay. If it had been there, I would have to type the command delete vlan.dat and press enter 3 times. In this case, it's not there. And then if I had a startup configuration present, and I had a VLAN file present, and I deleted them, at this point I would have to do the reload command and reload the entire switch. And that takes about 3 minutes. Okay, so I'm ready to start doing this stuff on the page 2. We're already at the privilege exec mode. I'll just illustrate. I'll go and log on back again. Normally you attach to the switch. You're in the user exec mode, which is a limited read only. You can't really do much stuff. Hold this 1 second. Where the heck is, oh, here it is. I have these ghostly double images here. Okay, so step 2, little a, we're supposed to go to the privilege exec mode. The command is enabled, and the prompt changes from the caret sign greater than sign to the pound sign. Now we know we're in the privilege exec mode. Verify a clean configuration. We did that. He says use the show run command, and you can look for things that are in there that shouldn't be in there. The default running configuration I did show run. Default host name switch, no IP addresses, no passwords have been set. It's all blank right now. To me, the easier way to check is to do just show start, and there's no startup configuration. Sorry? Yes, you may print the lab. I won't disturb anybody. You mean the poor babies at home that couldn't drag themselves in the rain here today? No, that's okay. All right. So I'm going to now go into the global configuration mode, and the very first thing he does in the lab, and I agree with him, is to give the guy a host name, so we don't get confused as to what device is what device. So I'm going to go into the global configuration mode with configure terminal, config T for short, and his host name is supposed to be S1. Most of the time when you type an iOS command, it patches into RAM instantly, so instantly the prompt changes to S1. Now if I show the startup configuration, which is, it hasn't been saved yet. He hasn't told us to do that yet. Okay, now we're going to set the enable password. This is the password that keeps people from getting from the user exec mode to the privilege exec mode. And if they're not an IT technician, they're authorized to do this, they shouldn't know the password. So in the real world, don't use class. Use a harder password in your company that you work for when you do your Cisco stuff in the workplace. So enable secret class. Notice sometimes there's a trend for people, I don't know, they're teaching this to you guys in typing class or something. You put a space and then you put the enter key. That's the password now. It's class space. And now you can't get back in because you thought it was class. So they only do what you tell them to and what you meant to. Don't put a space after it unless you want to remember there's a space after this. Space is an allowed character in a password on some machines, not on others. Okay, so now it's done that, and if I do this and go back to the user exec mode and type the enable command, class. It doesn't show on the screen when I type it. Now the next command, little e on the bottom, toward the bottom of page 2, I'll go back to the global configuration mode. I'm going to put the command no IP domain lookup, and let me repeat that syntax. That's so if you mistype a command, it doesn't hang up the machine for a minute while it's trying to look up. If you type a command that's not spelled exactly the way it should be, like a legal command, he says, you're trying to telnet or you're trying to ping some other device. He tries to look it up. And that can hang the machine for about a minute. It's annoying. Or terrifying if you're in the middle of a skills exam. Okay, now we're going to put the banner message of the day. Whatever your company management tells you should put in this. And now he says to type the word exit, and then type the word exit again. And we're logged off. And you notice that you see the warning, authorized users only, before you even enter the secret password. So we're supposed to type the command enable now and return to the privilege exec mode. That was the word class spaces. Now we're going to apply a management address to the switch. So in order to be able to ping it or telnet to it, it's an IP address. Most of these switches that go out in the world will never be given an IP address. They'll never be managed. They're in a smaller company. There's only 1 or 2 switches. I just want them to be a fast hub. So I'll go to the global configuration mode and say interface VLAN 1. The IP address is 192.168.1.2, which is the address we're going to use for our switches pretty much through this whole Cisco Academy thing. The first switch is usually 1.2, the second switch is usually 1.3. We have to put that so-called subnet mask. I don't like the word mask. It sounds like it's hiding something. I mean, it's not the Phantom of the Opera. So no shutdown. And now we're going to do, I'm going to configure the passwords for the console port and the passwords for the so-called virtual terminal VTY port. That's the port we're going to telnet into from our PCA after we configure it to be able to communicate with this. So we're plugged into the console port right now. I'm plugged into the console port of my switch up here. So I'll say line console 0, password Cisco. Sets the password to be Cisco. Don't put a space and then the enter key, or else the password will be Cisco space. And the login command enables logins to happen with that password. And then I'll say line VTY 0 through 15. Is that what he says? He says 4. I'll do what he says. Switches actually have 16 connections. And the same exact syntax, password Cisco, login. We'll prove that in a second when we actually telnet to the device. So now I'm going to totally log off. And now I get the warning. Kind of messed it up there. So authorized users only. And then I'm supposed to put in you always use the same password. The first password is Cisco. The second password is class. So I'll put in the Cisco, which is the console password. It's also our telnet password. And I'll type enable and say class. And I'm back at the second. That showed how that worked. Now we have configured an address on our switch. If I type show IP interface brief, you can see that it's 192.168.1.2. It's up and up. So let's see. I talked about in the last chapter 3 on Monday about the layers. So we have our network access layer that corresponds to the old physical and data link layers. So the one first up is the physical layer. That means the wire's plugged in. We can transmit electricity through it. The second up is the wire. Both devices on both ends of the wire are speaking the same protocol, Ethernet in this case. So as an example, as an allegory, a telephone wire connects a telephone in Italy to a telephone in the United States. So the wire carries the voices, and the wire doesn't care about what language is being spoken. But if I need to speak to someone in Italy, and if they don't understand English, I better learn to speak Italian. That's like the protocol. So we have to agree upon the line. The lines have to work where the phone lights up, and then we have to both speak the same language so that we can communicate with each other. So layer 1 is a physical layer, layer 2 is a data link layer. So it looks like it took that IP address okay, it's up and up. Now we're going to go to the PCA and configure an IP address. And I put a shortcut on all these, Cisco Lab shortcut, which takes you straight to the properties. And this is the normal setting. By default, on all Windows machines, all Mac OS machines, all Linux machines, you have this set to obtain the IP address automatically. Your home router gets an IP address automatically from your, oh, it's time for the survey. Cable always wins. Raise your hand if you're connected to the cable company and not the phone company. Nobody's connected to nothing? Everybody's connected. Who's connected to the phone company? Nobody's connected to nothing? You have the phone company? You have the DSL or whatever? Every time I've done this survey in the past, overwhelmingly everyone's connected to the cable company to get their internet service. So your cable router they give you, or the one that you buy for yourself, it does this to the cable company. They give you a global unique public IP address, that's what everybody else in the world sees you at. And of course, inside your home, you're 192.168.1. So most of the time we leave that on obtain the IP address automatically because everybody in the world uses this DHCP function, assign IP addresses. They're okay and not conflicting and not duplicated to all the other devices on the network. But in this case, we don't have this yet, so we're going to go ahead and specify it manually. So on the chart on the front page, it gives the IP address for the PCA's 192.168.1.10. Windows automatically fills in the subnet mask for you. That should be appropriate. You can change it if it's something different. Yeah, we're not doing advanced subnetting yet, so this one will be just. Now I put a shortcut in the bottom here, this black DOS screen looking thing. And I just want to check. Type ipconfig, it's all one word, and it looks like it took my address. Sometimes these virtual machines just lose their minds, and you'll type ipconfig, and he'll say, even though you did it properly, you put it in 192.168 properly, he'll say, oh, my address is 0.0.00, or it says 169.2, it'll say something weird. So usually we can fix that by going into the virtual machine and turning off the network interface and turning it back on again, and that usually fixes it. In this case, it worked okay for me. Thank you, baby Jesus, it's working properly. Okay, so it's the address is set properly. Now let's see, he's going to do on page 4, part 2, step 1, we're going to show the configuration on the switch. So I'll switch back to the switch, and I'll do that show run command. And there's a couple of changes in here. In S1, I made it S1. Enable secret class, encrypted. So in case you're interested, that's a CCNA 4 thing. That's the MD5, Message Digest 5 encryption. Here's our management address, the so-called switch virtual interface, SVI. It's the VLAN 1. That's the 1.2 address. And then the password from console port is Cisco, and the password coming in to the telnet port is also Cisco. And I think we talked last time in the last slide, we used another command called server's password encryption that would slightly hang those up. Yes, sir. Sorry? On the switch? It tells you how to set the IP address on the switch on page, sort of right near the center of page 3 of the lab. Be in the global configuration mode and top that interface VLAN. Hang on just a second, I'll see if I can help you out. Let me run through the last of this here. Okay, so we're type show run, and we see the configuration that I did. Warning, sometimes when you see the show command printed on the paper lab, it may look slightly different than your real switch. It may have a slightly different version of the iOS operating system on it, but it's usually not significant. I already did the command show IP interface brief. We saw that the VLAN was up and up, and port 6 is up and up. Our little PCA is plugged into port 6. Now, before you ever try to FTP or telnet or something from 2 devices, you need to check connectivity first with ping. Ping is our little magic test to make sure that we can hear each other. We can hear each other on the network, like so in our, ping the target and we connect to it. Okay, fine. So he says go to the PC, and first of all, ping his own address, 192.168.1.10. That should always work because that's his own address. Now, I'm going to ping the switch. And it worked. First one failed. To do something we'll see about later called address resolution protocol. It takes a second. The very first time you connect to something, if it's been more than 3 minutes or so, it needs to line up or re-correlate a layer 2 MAC address, physical address, with a layer 3 logical IP address. So that's why the first ping failed. If I ping it again, notice it works fine. I didn't talk more than 3 minutes. You said anywhere there's not an X. You said anywhere you can find that doesn't have an X. Okay, now this step 3, we're not running Windows 7, so you should not have to do this. But we're going to try to telnet to the switch. So I'm going to type telnet 192.168.1.2. And there's my telnet connection to the switch. It looks like a console. So what was our first password? Is always Cisco. Go to the privilege exec mode. Yes. So I've connected remotely to the switch through the network connection. Now he's going to have a save from the telnet remote connection. I'm on page 8. We're going to save the configuration on the switch. The copy run start command takes whatever is in RAM right now that maybe hasn't been saved recently. Hold on, hang close. I'm going to help everybody just a second here as we finish recording this walkthrough. So I'm going to type copy run start, which is short for copy. I'll spell it out. Copy running configuration, startup configuration. They'll take abbreviations just so long as they're is unique enough. and you have to press enter 2 times. And now when I do the show start, our running configuration is now duplicated in the NV RAM. And if I turn the switch off, the RAM will vanish instantly. I don't care what you saw on CSI Tulsa with Freon spraying on the RAM chips. It doesn't work. When you turn off something, in 1/1000th of a second, the RAM loses everything. RAM memory has to be refreshed 1,000 times a second. As long as the computer's on, it's going refresh, refresh, refresh 1,000 times a second. When you turn the power off, it's gone instantly. But NVRAM is like a flash drive. So when you did the copy run start command, you saved it to the NVRAM. And so that means if the switch crashes or the power is lost and restored, it'll just boot back up again, and no one will have to come in there and completely reconfigure the switch. It'll assume all that stuff and come back up again. I'm supposed to cut the word quit, and there. It took me back to the DOS prompt. So this reflection question says something about, why don't I just telnet into the switch to configure it the first time? Why couldn't I do that? I had no IP address, I had no configuration. I couldn't ping again. I had to go to the console port first, set the IP address of the switch to the 1.2 address, enable the passwords, because Cisco has the safety feature that if you're setting up a switch on the network and you haven't set the passwords yet, and someone tries to telnet in real fast before the passwords are set, it won't allow that to take place. You have to actually set a password before you're allowed to do this. So that's why it wouldn't work. Okay, hang loose, I'm gonna stop the recording.